Massive changes have been made in Solar Leveling Arise Overdrive, and today I'll be going over all of the big changes and how it differs from the current game. So the first big change in SLA Overdrive is going to be to the combat system, because a brand new mechanic they've added is going to be potions. And what potions obviously do is basically you can just use them to then recover a good amount of HP, but what you can also do is actually change the formula of them to then give you bonus effects such as increasing your attack. Blocking and deflecting is another brand new mechanic where basically when blocking you can mitigate quite a lot of damage whilst you are holding the block stance, but after successfully blocking an enemy's attack at the very right time you can actually then deflect that said attack, and when this is applied in hunter mode it doesn't really do anything special outside of triggering a QTE skill, but when it comes to Jinwoo it's actually a lot more interesting because it will allow you to follow up with sort of like a counter attack as well as also one of his brand new QTE skills. Core attacks are also removed and have actually been replaced with something called a heavy attack, and these are essentially just exactly the same thing as a core attack. However, the difference is like from the base game you don't actually have to build up a core gauge, and instead on Overdrive it's just basically a cooldown. Another newly added combat mechanic into Solar Leveling Arise Overdrive is going to be special attacks, and this is only exclusive to Jinwoo for him to use. So the way this works is when you press the basic attack button or key after you use a dash, your Jinwoo will be able to just instantly activate the special attack and will be able to attack very quickly, and the way I see this being useful is just as a pretty nice and easy way to start your basic attack combos. And then the final very big change to the Overdrive combat system is going to be to the elemental status effect, which is a newly introduced mechanic. So when you are attacking an enemy, of course you'll be doing elemental damage, but in Overdrive it's slightly different because that element that you are attacking them with will actually accumulate onto the enemy, and once that sort of accumulation stacking has completely maxed out, you'll then be able to apply a elemental status effect depending on which elements you are attacking the enemy with, and these extra effects that they do apply are basically just sort of extra instances of damage, and they do quite a lot of damage to be fair, that also do come with their own sort of effects slash debuffs. And this elemental status effect system does promote the player using different elements, because once you've then actually applied a second and different sort of elemental status effects, you can then trigger what is called an elemental chain, which will then apply chaos or overwhelm, again doing a lot of damage. The next category of changes is actually going to be to your hunters, because unlike the current game where you have to draw and pull for characters, in SLA Overdrive you actually have to offer them a contract in order for you to actually hire them. And each hunter will have a certain success rate which can be increased depending on how many commemorative points you do invest into them, with then I believe also the rank of the hunter as well as also their sort of like to yourself being Jinwoo also changing the success rate that they do have. But if you do want to then completely avoid the really bad success rate, you can just then use the hunter reports to then guarantee it. Your hunter's kits and abilities have also quite drastically changed, because for example we do have Lim Tae-gyu here who can now apply something called Enfeeble, which does significantly decrease your enemy's attack and defense, as well as also hunter's skill like damage scaling has changed, because for example Eugene-ho can now scale his damage off of attack and defense. And then the final change to hunters is going to be something completely brand new, which is called the Synchro Chain, and this is available for you to use once you have filled up the EX gauge, which is the purple bar that you can see in the bottom left of your screen. And after activating the Synchro Chain, all of your hunters in your party will use their ultimate skills at the very same time, which is probably going to give you a huge amount of extra damage. And as well, after it has actually been used, your hunter's stats will then significantly be increased for a certain period of time. Weapon crafting is up next, and this has received a lot of changes to be honest from the current game, because like in the current game where you have to use like the sort of rarity tickets as well as some materials in order for you to make a certain weapon, this weapon crafting system in Overdrive definitely does expand upon it, because you need a lot more materials in order for you to make whichever weapon you want. And these new materials are simply obtained through many different ways, such as defeating enemies, bosses, harvesting plants, mining ores, and even completing map objectives. But finally, when it does specifically come to crafting weapons with your Jinwoo, he does actually have a lot of sort of brand new like versions of weapons, because for example there's like this like brand new version of Thetis' Grimoire that has like a brand new skill animation and a load of new effects. So I'd say it definitely does expand upon the current weapons that are in the game. The penultimate really big change made in SLA Overdrive is going to be the co-op system, because when in co-op gameplay play, you are limited to having up to 4 different players that you can play with at a time, taking on missions together. So then when it does come to looking at the co-op menu itself, you have 4 different sort of menus for you to look through, with quick search, search by chapter, and then search by boss, and then finally the ability to create your own co-op lobbies. So the first 3 are very similar, because quick search, you can just quickly search for any random lobby. Searching by chapter lets you look through a specific story chapter, and then searching by boss then lets you look through a certain boss that you want to farm, and then you can see which lobbies are available for you to play. But of course, creating a co-op lobby will be the most different out of them all, because once you do go to create a lobby, you can set a co-op lobby name, the access mode being public or private, with private only really being when you want to like play with your friends. But when you are doing that, you will then have to set a password. Then the final change, I had to save the best to last, which is going to be all of the changes to Sung Jinwoo. And one pretty big change that you might have actually missed on if you have currently played the demo is going to be the stat point investment. Because just like the current SLA game, when you are investing points in strength, vitality, agility, intelligence, and perception, they will also just normally increase their normal sort of stat bonuses. But for example, if I were to go and click on intelligence, what it will say is it will actually also increase my elemental status effect and chaos/overwhelm related damage. And then if I go to look at strength, it also now increases the damage taken decrease effect when you're blocking. Vitality increases the amount of HP regained when using potions. And then finally as well, agility and perception have their own effects. Jinwoo has also received 2 brand new QTE skills, with them being obliteration and also retraction, which is a really cool kick. He also has brand new sort of like versions of his current basic skills, with them being unlocked through skill trees. And when looking at his skill trees, he has 3 different tabs that you can look through, with the first one being to do with all of his combat styles. The second is to do with all of the weapons you can equip. And then the third one is just sort of like body and like stat enhancement. So then a really cool example of how his skills have changed, we have a rune like Pummel, which is just pretty normal. But then when we get to the unlimited strike version, it goes to something like this. And then the final thing I do want to touch on when it comes to skill trees are sort of the combat styles that he does have, and all of these play completely different to each other, because Assassin, for example, does like to focus on back attack damage. Duelist works around the stagger/break mechanic and also increasing the damage that you deal to enemies who are suffering from stagger. Elementalist then focuses on elemental status effects and increasing the stacking efficiency of your elements, as well as also increasing the damage of chaos and overwhelm. As well as finally Ruler, which focuses on summoning shadows and increasing your normal monster damage. So then to end off all of your changes with Sung Jinwoo, we have his Monarch's Awakening. And this, in my opinion, is by far the coolest thing that they have added to SLA Overdrive, and just like the Synchro Chain, the Monarch's Awakening is activated once the EX gauge has completely filled up, which again is the purple meter that you can see below your mana points. And after transforming with your Jinwoo, the EX gauge will actually be continuously consumed, so you only have it for a limited amount of time. With the Monarch Awakening giving Jinwoo brand new basic attack combos, I believe 4 new basic skills, and even a brand new ultimate skill, which all look absolutely fantastic. So there you have it. Those are 5 massive changes that have been made in Solo Leveling Arise Overdrive. And overall, if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!